There's a special kind of exhaustion that only mothers understand. It's not just physical. It seeps into your bones, your breath, your thoughts. The kind of tired that no amount of sleep can fix, because it's not just about sleep. It's about doing everything alone. I had been doing everything alone for almost 4 years. My name is Julia, and my son Lucas is the only reason I wake up in the morning. He's my light, my miracle, my entire world. His father left when I was 4 months pregnant, said he wasn't ready to be a dad. I haven't heard from him since. I never thought I would raise a child by myself, but I did. I worked, I cooked, I cleaned, I nursed him through fevers, carried him through tantrums, and kissed his cheeks until they smelled like me. And still, no one ever asked me how I was holding up, not even once, except for my mother-in-law. Even though Lucas's father, her son, had vanished, Vera insisted on being in our lives. She said Lucas was still her blood, that he deserved to have a grandmother. In the beginning, I kept my distance. There was something cold about her warmth, if that makes any sense. She smiled, but her eyes scanned me like I was under examination. She offered help, but only in ways that reminded me of how little I had. When I said no thanks, she insisted. Still, I couldn't ignore that I was drowning. The day it happened, the day I said yes, was a Sunday. I hadn't slept the night before. Lucas had thrown up twice, and I'd spent the entire night rocking him in my arms. That morning, Vera called and said she was in the neighborhood. She had a tone of sugar in her voice. "I'll stay with Lucas for a few hours," she said. "You look like a ghost, Julia. Go take a shower, nap, breathe." I hesitated. I had never left him with anyone. "I promise," she added. "I raised 2 kids, remember? I know what I'm doing." She arrived minutes later. She smelled like talcum powder and lavender, comforting smells that masked something sharper beneath. Lucas reached for me as I handed him over, his tiny hands tugging my sleeve. That should have been the first sign, but I was too tired to read it. "I'll be back in 2 hours," I said. "Take 3, she smiled. I did something I hadn't done in years. I lay down on my couch and closed my eyes. The silence felt foreign. I had almost forgotten what my house sounded like without Lucas's tiny footsteps or constant humming. I felt guilty, but I told myself it was okay to rest, that I needed to trust people more. 3 hours passed. No calls, no texts. I picked up my phone and messaged her. "Everything okay?" No reply. A small knot formed in my stomach. I told myself not to panic, but the feeling didn't go away. I drove over. Her house was just 10 minutes away, a nice 2-story place in a quiet neighborhood. Lucas loved her big garden. He said the roses smelled like juice boxes. I smiled at the memory as I parked. Her front door was open, not wide, but just enough to make me uneasy. "Hello?" I called. No answer. I stepped in. The house was eerily quiet, save for the faint sound of the television playing some talk show. I moved toward the living room and found her on the couch, flipping through channels, feet up like she didn't have a care in the world. "Where's Lucas?" I asked. She waved her hand lazily toward the hallway. "Sleeping. He cried so much, I had to let him wear himself out." I walked to the guest bedroom where he usually napped. The door was closed. I opened it gently. And what I saw, Lucas lay on the bed in his clothes, cheeks stained with dried tears, lips dry, and his teddy bear tucked under his arm. He looked drained. His eyes fluttered when I touched his forehead, warm, not feverish, but flushed. His diaper hadn't been changed. I picked him up. He whimpered softly. Back in the living room, I said, "Why didn't you message me?" She didn't even turn to look at me. "Honestly, Julia, you worry too much. He's fine. Kids cry. You're going to have to toughen him up eventually." I stood there, frozen. A storm of emotions clashing inside me. Guilt, anger, fear. But more than anything, shame. Because I had let my guard down. That night, Lucas clung to me like never before. When I tried to put him down, he sobbed and clutched my shirt with both hands. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, feeling every ounce of trust I had given that woman curdle into regret. The worst part? I didn't know this was just the beginning. It started with small things, details so subtle they almost passed me by. A scratch on Lucas's elbow, a purple mark near his shoulder, the way he flinched when someone raised their voice. He'd always been a sensitive boy, but now he was afraid of shadows that weren't there. At first, I chalked it up to toddler clumsiness. He was learning to climb, explore, test limits. Kids get bruises. That's what I told myself. It's what I needed to believe. But something about him had changed. Lucas used to be the kind of child who laughed at the smallest things. He made games out of nothing. He'd turn a spoon into a spaceship, a sock into a puppet. His imagination was a world I happily got lost in. But after that first day with Vera, something had dimmed. He was quieter, more clingy. His eyes followed me around the house like he was afraid I'd disappear. One night, as I was tucking him in, he whispered, "Don't leave me with her again." My heart stuttered. "What did you say, baby?" He looked down, fingers fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. "Grandma makes me scared." Those words carved into me like a blade. I asked him gently, "What do you mean, sweetheart?" But he went silent. A wall went up, the way children sometimes do when they've already learned that the truth won't save them. I spent the entire night staring at the baby monitor. He tossed, turned, whimpered in his sleep. I held onto the words, "Grandma makes me scared," and tried to reason them away. Maybe she had scolded him. Maybe she'd snapped out of frustration. Maybe I was imagining things. The next day, I brought it up with Vera. She smiled, wide and sweet, but her eyes didn't smile with her. "He's such a dramatic little boy," she laughed. "Always been sensitive. You coddle him too much. No wonder he acts up." I should have known then. I should have known. But instead, I nodded and muttered something about him having a wild imagination. I let her talk over me, dismiss me. I let her convince me that the instincts rising like sirens in my chest were just maternal anxiety. That I was the problem. And that's how she got away with it. Because mothers are always questioned, especially when the danger comes wearing a familiar face. Because when someone says grandmother, you imagine cookies, lullabies, birthday cards, not bruises, and fear and silence. A week later, I noticed Lucas wouldn't go into his own room unless I was there. He'd sit outside the door and cry. One afternoon, he had a full-blown panic attack when I mentioned going to the grocery store alone. I brought this up to Vera again. She rolled her eyes and said, "He's manipulating you. He's learned that all he has to do is cry, and you bend over backward. That's your fault, Julia. You're raising a soft boy." That phrase, soft boy, burned into me. Like love needed to be tough, like fear was a form of discipline. I tried to stop bringing Lucas to her house. I started making excuses. She didn't take them well. "Oh, so now you don't trust me," she snapped one day. I hesitated. She continued, her voice cold and measured. "You think you're a better mother than I ever was? I raised 2 boys on my own, Julia, and they turned out just fine." My stomach twisted. One of those boys had walked out on his child. That was fine? I held Lucas tighter. Despite my best efforts, the pressure from other family members crept in. They said I was being unfair, that Vera had done nothing wrong, that I was overreacting. I even got a call from Vera's sister who said, "You're lucky to have someone willing to help you. Not everyone has a mother-in-law who wants to be involved." So I caved. Again. Just for 2 hours, I told myself. Just enough time to run errands without juggling a toddler and a shopping cart. Just enough time to catch my breath. When I returned, Lucas was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. His face was pale, his eyes glassy. He didn't run to me. He didn't say anything at all. It took everything in me not to collapse right there. That night, as I undressed him for bed, I noticed something on his back. 3 long, thin marks, like fingernail scratches. I froze. He didn't cry. He didn't even flinch. He just said, in the smallest voice, "I didn't listen fast enough." That was it. That was the moment everything inside me snapped. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just bad parenting. It wasn't a generational difference. It wasn't discipline. It was abuse. And I had let it happen. It's strange how quickly love can turn to fear. One moment you're telling yourself, "She's family. She would never hurt him." The next, you're holding your son in the dark, afraid to sleep because you don't know what else has been done to him. After that night, after I saw those marks, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I couldn't. My rage was too raw, and my guilt too sharp. I needed proof. Real, undeniable, irrefutable proof. Because I knew what would happen if I accused her without it. She'd turn everyone against me. She'd cry, play the victim, and I'd be the hysterical, overprotective single mother who just couldn't handle help. So I started documenting everything, every mark, every change in Lucas's behavior, every excuse she gave. I wrote it all down. I took photos, quietly, secretly, and then I did something I never imagined I'd do. I bought a voice recorder. It was small, discreet, and fit perfectly in Lucas's backpack. I told myself it was just to ease my mind, that maybe I was wrong. Maybe she was harsh, but not cruel. Maybe the marks were coincidence. Maybe Lucas misunderstood. Maybe I did. But the truth was already there. I was just afraid to face it. The next time I let her take him, I stood by the window and watched as they walked to her car. He didn't wave goodbye. He just held his bear tightly and kept his head down. I waited the full 2 hours, heart pounding the entire time. When she brought him back, she acted like everything was normal. She handed me a bag of cookies she claimed they'd baked together. Lucas didn't speak. He walked straight into the house and sat in the corner with his bear, humming to himself. That night, when he was asleep, I played the recording. It started normal. She spoke softly at first, told him to sit. Then it shifted. "You're not listening again," she snapped. "What did I tell you? Do you want me to get the belt?" There was silence, then a soft whimper. "Answer me!" she barked. I heard a thud, something falling, Lucas crying. She screamed, "Stop crying! You're such a baby! Your mother's raising you to be weak! Men don't cry!" Another slap, a scuffle, more crying. And then, the worst part. Her voice dropped, quiet and sharp. "If you tell her, I'll make sure she never sees you again. Do you hear me?" I dropped the recorder. I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone had reached inside my chest and ripped my lungs out. I fell to my knees in the hallway, hands shaking, body trembling. I wanted to scream, but Lucas was sleeping. I couldn't wake him. Not now. I stayed up all night. I kept replaying the audio in my head, over and over. I thought of every time I'd defended her, every time I doubted my own son, every time I'd handed him over to her, trusted her. The betrayal wasn't just hers. It was mine too. The next morning, I took Lucas to daycare and called a lawyer. Then I called her. I told her I knew, that I had the recording, that I was done being silent. She didn't react the way I thought she would. She laughed. "Do you really think anyone's going to believe you over me?" she said. "I'm respected. I'm a retired teacher. You're a struggling single mom with no husband and a chip on your shoulder." Her words sliced me open. And yet, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You'll never be near him again." And I hung up. I went to the police, filed a report, handed over the evidence. They took it seriously, thank God. But the process was slow, painfully slow. Weeks passed before a restraining order was granted. In the meantime, she did what she'd threatened. She turned the family against me. My phone lit up with calls and messages. "Why would you lie like this? She loves Lucas. You've always been too sensitive." Some even accused me of coaching him, of inventing the whole thing out of bitterness. I didn't respond. I didn't explain. I didn't owe them anything. But I did owe Lucas protection. One night, he woke up from a nightmare and ran to my bed. He wrapped his arms around my neck and whispered, "Thank you for not making me go there anymore." That was all I needed. That was enough. I held him for the rest of the night, promising in my heart that no matter how hard it got, I would never doubt him again. No matter how many people called me crazy. No matter how alone I felt. Because this wasn't just about justice. It was about safety. It was about truth. And I was done being silent. They say the devil doesn't come with horns and fire. He comes dressed as someone you love, someone you trust. In Vera's case, she came in floral blouses and pearls. She smelled like gardenias and baked shortbread. She smiled with that polite tightness that made people say, "She's old-fashioned but kind." She hosted holiday dinners with perfectly folded napkins and place cards. She volunteered at the church. She bought Lucas toys, nothing flashy, always educational. The kind of grandmother people dream of. But behind that porcelain mask, there was something much darker. I used to wonder how she fooled everyone, how no one else saw the way her smile never reached her eyes. the way her kindness always came with conditions. But now I know. It's because people don't want to look. They don't want to believe someone so polished, so respectable, could be cruel, especially not to a child. After I filed the police report and was granted a protective order, the backlash came hard and fast. The family group chat exploded. Some relatives left vague posts online. Some people don't value family until they lose it. Others sent me private messages accusing me of destroying Vera's reputation, of poisoning Lucas's mind, of making a mountain out of a misunderstanding. I didn't respond to any of them, but I read every word, because I needed to know who believed me and who didn't. Most didn't. That's what happens when you accuse the matriarch. You're not just challenging a person, you're challenging a legacy. And legacies are stubborn things. Vera, of course, denied everything. She hired a lawyer and claimed the audio was heavily edited. She told people I had always been jealous of her relationship with Lucas, that I had been unstable since the day her son left me, that I was using my child as a pawn in some sick game of revenge. She even tried to file for grandparent visitation rights. The audacity, the sheer coldness of it stunned me, but it didn't stop me. I had the audio, I had the photos, I had Lucas's words, quiet but truthful. And I had one thing she would never have, my son's trust. Still, her mask worked on others. One afternoon, I bumped into her friend at the grocery store, a woman named Marlene. She gave me a pitiful smile and said, "We all make parenting mistakes. Maybe you two just need to sit down and talk." Parenting mistake? Threatening a child into silence? Hitting him? That's not a mistake. That's a choice. But I didn't yell. I didn't argue. Because I was learning something important. Abusers survive by charm. Victims survive by silence. But mothers? We survive by fire. I used that fire to push through the legal battle. I submitted everything. I had Lucas's pediatrician write a statement about the emotional changes in his behavior. I had his therapist describe the regression in his speech and the drawings he made, pictures of a woman with sharp teeth and fire hands. He drew that after her last visit. The court dates were grueling. Vera sat across from me, dressed like a saint, clutching tissues, dabbing her eyes as if she were the victim. She gave the judge a speech about how much she loved Lucas, how much it hurt her to be cut off. She never once apologized, never admitted fault. And yet, I watched as doubt flickered in the judge's eyes. Because appearances matter. Because in our world, trauma needs bruises to be believed. And even then, it has to be the right kind of bruise. But I refused to let her win. Lucas didn't need her love. He needed safety. He needed to know that no matter how powerful someone seemed, how respected, how trusted, they couldn't get away with hurting him. So I spoke. In court, I read a statement. My voice shook, but I read every word. "I am not trying to ruin a woman's life," I said. "I'm trying to protect a child's." The room was silent. Vera rolled her eyes, and that was when the judge made the decision. Restraining order upheld. Grandparent visitation denied. Case closed. Afterward, I sat in my car and cried. Not tears of relief, tears of exhaustion, of grief, because I knew the damage wasn't undone. There was no victory here, only survival. When I came home, Lucas was drawing on the floor. He looked up at me and asked, "Is she gone now?" I nodded. He smiled. Not big, not bright, but enough. It would take time, maybe years, but that smile told me we'd get there. Still, sometimes, when I'm walking down the street or waiting in line, I feel eyes on me. I hear the whispers. She turned the family upside down. She exaggerated. She lied. Let them talk. I don't need their approval. I have the truth, and my son has his peace. That's more than she'll ever have. Healing isn't something that happens all at once. It doesn't arrive like a sunrise, sudden and golden. It creeps in slowly, like the first breath after a long cry. After the court decision, I thought things would start to feel better. And in some ways they did. But in other ways, the damage was deeper than I had allowed myself to understand. Lucas still woke up at night. He still checked the locks on the doors before bed. He still jumped at sudden noises, flinched when someone touched his shoulder too quickly, and refused to be in a room with the lights off. He didn't talk much about her, but his silence was its own kind of story. His therapist told me, Children don't always process trauma with words. They use behavior. Watch what he does. That's where the truth lives now. So I watched, and I waited. We developed a new routine. Every morning we'd make pancakes together. He'd stir the batter with his tiny hands, getting flour on the counter and sometimes in his hair. We'd listen to soft music, and I'd let him pick the playlist, even if it meant repeating the same song 20 times. I wanted him to feel control again, to feel safe. In the afternoons, we'd build blanket forts. He liked to sit inside them with his stuffed animals and whisper stories to them. I never asked what they were about. I just sat close and listened to the sound of his little voice weaving new worlds where monsters were always defeated, and the heroes wore pajamas and carried flashlights. Some days were good, some weren't. One day, I found him hiding in the laundry room, curled up, shaking. I didn't ask questions. I just sat beside him, held him, and said, "You're safe. She can't hurt you anymore." He didn't reply, but he rested his head on my shoulder. That was enough. I tried going back to work full-time, but I couldn't. I was afraid of leaving him, even at school. I started freelancing from home, balancing invoices between nap times and snack breaks. Money was tight, but we managed. What hurt more than the financial struggle was the loneliness. Most of the family had cut us off. Birthdays went uncelebrated. Holidays were quiet. There were no more barbecues or Sunday lunches. No cousins to play with. No calls to check in. And still, I wouldn't change a thing. Because I had chosen my son. Over convenience, over appearances, over keeping the peace. One night, a message came in from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. It was Vera. "One day he'll hate you for what you did. Just wait." I didn't reply. I blocked the number, but the words stayed in my head longer than I'd like to admit. Because sometimes, when Lucas asked questions I couldn't answer, when he missed people who were no longer in his life, when he cried for reasons I couldn't fix, I wondered, would he blame me one day? Would he grow up and think I overreacted? That I took away his grandmother because I couldn't handle her? But then I'd remember his voice whispering, "She scares me," and the guilt would melt back into certainty. We started keeping a happy journal. Every night, before bed, we'd each write down one good thing from the day. Sometimes his entries were silly. I saw a bird poop on a car. Sometimes they were quiet victories. I didn't cry when the thunder came. And sometimes they were heartbreakingly simple. You were home. One night I wrote, "I'm proud of how brave you are." He smiled when I read it aloud. And then he said something I'll never forget. "I was only brave because you listened." That sentence shattered something in me. And rebuilt something too. He knew. Even in his tiny heart, he understood that what I did wasn't to hurt him, but to save him. And no matter what anyone else believed, he believed me. He trusted me. That was all I ever needed. As the months passed, we found our rhythm. We made new traditions, new memories. We adopted a cat named Toby. Lucas named him after a superhero sidekick he liked. Toby was soft, patient, and never left his side. Lucas started drawing again. Not the dark, chaotic scribbles I'd seen months ago, but bright, happy pictures. Smiling faces, trees, sunshine. One day, he drew the two of us holding hands, with a speech bubble over my head that read, "I got you." That picture still hangs on our fridge. We weren't fixed. Trauma doesn't disappear. But we were healing, and more importantly, we were healing together. Some stories end with closure, others with justice. Mine ends with neither. It ends with truth. The silence I once carried like armor has been broken. I used to think staying quiet protected my son, from judgment, from scrutiny, from the shame of what had been done to him. But silence, I've learned, protects the wrong people. Vera taught me that. Months passed after the court ruling. We lived quietly, carefully. Lucas was healing, but I knew that trauma doesn't keep a calendar. Some days he laughed so hard I cried. Other days he shut down over things I couldn't predict. Someone speaking too loudly, a certain perfume in the air, a stranger saying, "Be quiet," too harshly. But we got through those days, one by one. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, I got a call. It was from one of Vera's former neighbors, an older woman named Carmen. She said she'd seen Vera recently and overheard her saying things like, "She twisted that boy's mind." He loved me before she poisoned him. But Carmen didn't call to defend her. She called because she had something to confess. Apparently, Carmen had once seen Lucas crying through the window of Vera's house. She'd hesitated to say anything. I didn't want to interfere in family matters, she admitted. Now she regretted it. I thanked her, hung up the phone, and cried. Because the truth is, for every child who's hurt behind closed doors, there are people who see something and say nothing. People who are too polite, too uncomfortable, or too scared to speak up. I was one of them once. I saw the signs. I felt them. And still, I let Lucas go back, again and again. Not because I didn't care, because I was afraid of being wrong, afraid of being called dramatic, afraid of being alone. But I'm not afraid anymore. I started sharing our story, first with a few close friends, then with a local support group for mothers. I told them everything. The signs, the denials, the guilt, the legal process, the backlash, the healing. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel crazy. I felt seen. One woman told me her mother-in-law used to lock her daughter in the closet as punishment. Another said her father would tell her son he was worthless whenever she wasn't around. The stories poured out like floodgates had opened. That's when I realized this wasn't just my story. It was ours. So I wrote it down. Every word, every wound, every truth. I published it anonymously at first, on blogs, in forums. Then, under my name. The messages started coming in, from mothers, from fathers, from grown-up children who had never told anyone what their grandparents had done. Some thanked me, some asked for advice, some just said, "Now I know I'm not alone." Lucas doesn't know the full story yet, not in adult words, but one day, he will. And when that day comes, I want him to know that his mother wasn't perfect, but she was brave. That when the world told her to keep quiet, she spoke. That when everyone else looked away, she chose to see. Sometimes I wonder where Vera is now. She moved out of town shortly after losing the case. I heard she told people she was forced to leave because of lies. I don't care. Let her play the victim. I have no desire for revenge. I only want peace. And I have it now. It comes in small things. Lucas riding his bike without training wheels. His laughter echoing down the hallway. The way he says, "I love you, Mommy," without fear or hesitation. It comes in quiet mornings, coffee in hand, watching him draw pictures of superheroes and cats. It comes in knowing that he's safe and that I made that happen. People still judge me. I hear the whispers at school events. I see the looks at family gatherings I no longer attend. But their opinions don't matter anymore. I don't need their approval. I have something better. I have my son. I have our truth. And I have the knowledge that breaking the silence may have cost me relationships, reputation, and comfort. But it gave my child something far more precious. Freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom from harm. Freedom to grow up in a home where love isn't conditional. Where discipline doesn't mean pain. Where being soft isn't a flaw, but a gift. So here's what I'll say to anyone reading this, holding back the same scream I once swallowed. Trust your gut. Believe your child. Protect them, no matter who the threat is, because the titles people carry, mother, father, grandparent, they don't automatically mean safety. What matters is action. What matters is truth. And sometimes, love means standing alone. It means being the villain in someone else's story, so your child can have a happy ending in theirs. I was once terrified to speak, but not anymore. The silence is over.